Okay, so as you already know, I'm David, and today I'm going to be talking about Casper. But first, a couple of disclaimers. One, whatever I say does not reflect the views of the Ethereum Foundation. I just kind of have to say that to be safe. And also, I want to thank Carl Flourish, a colleague of mine, for making some of the slides I'm using today. Cool, let's jump right in. So, what is Casper? Casper is a proof-of-stake consensus system, and it's the next generation of the Ethereum network. So, why should we go to Casper? Basically, moving to it from where we are now. Right now, we're using proof of work. So, right now, blocks are basically being mined, and that involves a process of basically working through computationally difficult problems with hardware. The advantages of Casper and the proof-of-stake consensus mechanism is that first, you save a lot of resources and money. The costs are greatly reduced for energy usage, and you don't need an incredible amount of hardware to do what I would consider to be relatively pointless computational tasks. Their only objective is to mine blocks. They're not exactly performing a great good for human society. Kind of going off that, another advantage is there's no need to mint as many coins when you're using proof of stake. This is because under proof of work, so miners are putting in a lot of expenses into the hardware and to the energy. So you not only have to reward miners, you have to reward them with enough coins to incentivize them to spend the cost. Proof of stake, you take away the energy and the hardware, you can pay basically validators, which are going to be the equivalent of miners, less, which would decrease inflation. Next, Casper and proof of stake actively punishes bad actors, which we'll get into that more later, but it basically provides an extra measure of security. And lastly, Casper and proof of stake in general is argued to be less centralized than proof of work. This is because the returns on basically validating are more proportional than the returns on mining. For example, say I have 100 times as much to invest as you into mining equipment and mining energy, so like the energy that goes into mining, I will get more than 100x times return because of economies of scale. I can buy bigger hardware and reduce my energy costs more. Because the rewards in Casper and the proof of stake system are distributed completely proportionally, if I have 100 times as much to invest, I will only make 100 times as much profit. Cool. So today I'm going to be talking about a hybrid Casper overview. This will be the first step towards a complete proof of stake system, and it basically involves a combination of proof of stake and proof of work. So how this works is a user will deposit a set amount of F, and then they become a validator. Then, as a validator, they will vote on the canonical order of the chain. Basically, they will determine what goes in the one true Ethereum chain and keep it going forward, and their vote will be backed by however much Ether they deposited. Then, the last step is that validators can withdraw their deposit after certain quiet time, or basically their funds are locked away for a set amount of time after they stop being validators. This is so that their funds can be taken away, so that they can be punished. Without the time lock of their funds, someone can act badly as a validator, withdraw their funds, and even at that point, even if you realize, hey, this person was a bad actor, you couldn't punish them for it. But with the time lock, you can. So the outcomes for being a validator, basically there are two possible outcomes. One, you keep the one true chain going forward and you get rewarded for it. Two, you stagnate or create multiple chains and you lose money. So those are the two potential outcomes. So,
hello. It's on.
Okay, cool.
Big sister.
Hi there. So, Casper's rollout will be incremental and will not immediately replace proof of work. So basically, when Casper first comes into play, it will take up a relatively small percentage of the overall rewards, and proof of work will still be the main source of rewards, and slowly the rewards gained from proof of work will decrease over time, and the rewards gained from proof of stake will increase. Why not just implement Casper and proof of stake right away? I mean, if it's so awesome, I listed the advantages, why not? Well, there are two main reasons. One, the miners currently mining would be pretty pissed, and they would be significantly more likely to just choose to create an alternative chain that would never take up proof of stake, so as to protect their mining hardware and their investments. And two, it's a lot simpler to implement hybrid Casper from a technical standpoint, because you're resting the proof of stake on the existing proof of work algorithm that has been proven to work for a while now at the beginning. Finality. What is finality, and why is it so important? Finality guarantees that history will never be changed. This is why, at least in my opinion, why blockchains are so amazing. They store data immutably. This is at their core. If I sell my house and I have $200,000, I want to be able to sleep at night knowing that a month from now that transaction will have happened and I still will have $200,000. And finality basically allows me to sleep at night by guaranteeing the safety of that transaction. So, getting into a little more of the nitty-gritty, Casper will first be implemented into the current working proof of work system through checkpointing. So, just for the miners of you in the crowd, Casper will not wipe out mining at first. Instead, these checkpoints will occur every 100 proof of work blocks. From now on, I will be talking about the set of 100 proof blocks as epochs. So every epoch, you have another Casper validated checkpoint. And the safety guarantee is that at least a checkpoint cannot be reverted unless at least 1/3 of validators get slashed. And I'll get into what slashing is a little down the road. So this is just a nice illustration of how hybrid Casper is going to work. Most of the blocks still done by miners, but then every checkpoint, Casper will come in and validate. So let's talk about some fun potential attacks. So what if miners, even though they're not being pushed out completely, decide that they don't want to support Casper transactions at all? Well, at this stage, it's kind of too bad for them, because as soon as Casper begins, it will take precedence, and I'll get that into a little more when I talk about forced choice and how the longest chain is determined. But basically, validators will be able to collude as well, and they will overrule the miner's attempt. This is where things get a little more interesting. What if validators collude with miners and censor a subset of validator transactions? So this would basically be if someone's trying to make a transaction that is widely unpopular and will cost a lot of people money, then it's plausible that miners and validators could get together to not allow a transaction to be put on the blockchain to protect their self-interest. There's no easy answer, I would say, to this problem, but it is dealt with fairly well, in my opinion, through the use of slashing conditions and censorship resistance, both of which I will cover down the road. If you take one thing from this slide, validators are in charge now. So I've been talking a lot about validators and checkpoints. How do validators actually validate a block? Well, they do it using messages, and the two messages are prepare and commit. So a prepare consists of the epoch number, which is the current number. So basically this would be 2, 1, 3, the current checkpoint number. Then the block hash, and then the epic source, which is the number of a previous checkpoint, and then the epic source hash, which is the hash of a previous checkpoint. I like to think of preparing it as signaling, in the sense that a validator can signal which block they're planning on supporting. One cool thing about prepares is that for a prepares epic source and epic source hash, it can basically talk to as many blocks back as it wants. As in the example here, where it's not going to the immediate epic before it, but it's going 2 epics back. It could go 3, it could go 4. It just has to talk to a valid epic block in the past. Commits. So commits are really where the magic happens. And they consist of the commit to string, and then the epic and the hash. And the cool thing about commits are as soon as a given epic hash combo receives 2/3 commits, it is finalized and cannot be undone unless slashing conditions are met, which I will get to. So basically, the economic finality in the case of Casper means that finality for a block to be reverted, at least 1/3 of validators' funds will have to be slashed, destroyed. So 1/3 of all the ether stake will be gone and taken out of the supply. Any questions now that I've gotten to this point? Yes?
How many validators will it be?
That is still being determined as far as I know.
Estimate, number?
I honestly wouldn't feel comfortable giving a certain number right now. They're still, as far as I know, they're still talking about it.
Do you think it would be more or less than miners in the proof of work?
Less.
Yeah, anyone can. So
Would you validate it?
in proof of work, you have this like random, like the block time is random, and that's a security feature, but it's also just the nature of the hashing algorithm. What's the block time in proof of stake?
So, okay. Can I answer that question and then I'll get to yours real quick?
Yeah.
Real quick. So basically, in terms of validators numbers, I'm not sure about the number of active validators, but anyone can be a validator. If
Stake pool, right?
you'd have to be in a stake pool if you don't have enough funds. They're still determining the minimal amount of funds, but they want to make it so that every validator or validator pool has enough at stake to follow the rules.
Right. I last read Vitalik said a month ago on Reddit, he said he estimated around 250 validators and a minimum staking of 1,000 Ethereum.
Yeah, 1,000.
Which, to me, I don't understand that. It seems kind of centralized. And the rich getting richer, and you have a lot less attack points because there's only 250 people controlling the entire market.
Not if there's a pool.
I mean, you could also argue.
Word has a lot more than just the 250, and they're in different geographical locations. So if a government came down and shut down 10% of validators, all the validators, that could be pretty bad.
Yeah.
Especially in China.
I won't get into it today, but that is somewhat covered. I think by validators being choice, how validators are chosen, and how the validators switch, so that if a certain amount did basically get taken or something, then the validators would get replaced and the system would keep going, or at least that's what's supposed to happen. Can I?
Yeah.
So basically, as of now, hybrid Casper, unfortunately, will not have an effect on block times, just because 99 blocks are still being mined.
Yeah.
And
With
so
full on.
with full-on Casper, the hope is that it will decrease block time and make it constant. The hope. Right now, I I can't make any promises about that. I guess it's supposed to do that, and I believe it will. But yeah, I'm sorry, that probably wasn't a very satisfying answer. But yeah.
No, I just wanted to analogize to your point of centralization. If validating can be analogized to high CPU process power, right? And you could take that stake down in steps instead of saying anybody with 10 ether can validate. Start with 100 ether or 1,000 ether, and then every set amount of time lower it an order of magnitude. That's a controlled process. Yes, there is centralization, but that's where we're going, right? Unless
So
you
in your example, you said 10 Ethereum?
Well, point one, okay, they started with 1,000, right? I'm saying every 4 weeks, let's get it down to 1 order of magnitude. So within like a year, it will go down to like everybody can have it. I think the point would be anybody should be able to validate, but just to keep the best practices going, because we have Ethereum Foundation, and have like a
Well, I
reference
think
protocol.
another reason you need validators is they're the ones doing the majority of the work. They have actual, very powerful machines, right? Running Java virtual machines, essentially.
Is it?
This is a very specialized, high-cost process.
No.
Yeah, it's not. It's just
Anyway, it's the differentiator is the stake. It's not the hardware. They're not with proof of work to be a very successful miner. Then you have to invest large amounts of money in energy and hardware. With proof of stake, you have to invest. You have to stake your ether instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are the what's the work they're doing? Are they processing smart contracts? Are they just adding to the blockchain?
They're taking in transactions and putting them together and making blocks, and they're choosing what blocks get added to what I like to think of as the one true chain. So other blocks can exist, but the validators that are staking their ether are the ones who have the final say.
I'm just really, don't understand how, like, they keep on talking about EVMs and, like, these very powerful devices that are processing all these complex smart contracts. Who does that type of work?
The validators. You have to run through all the code and get final state in order to submit a block.
Does that require physical hardware, or can anybody do that?
Yeah, but it's not the same as like mining hardware.
Right.
Yeah. It's like much less. So maybe we can discuss like more in detail afterwards.
There's a plan to go out to a bar. Last week we went to the beer garden, so we'll probably do a similar thing this week. And if anything doesn't get answered within the this context, it's all good.
It's fine.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So FYI, everybody, we're gonna get beer afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. What's the average stake time and then the average block time?
The average what time?
Stake time? Like, so on average, how often should a block be validated by a validator? And then also, what is the time block after a block has been validated?
The time period after a block has been validated. Right now, I'm pretty sure it's like going to run at around 12 minutes. I believe, but yeah.
Would that be sort of like paralleling what like a master node is, or not really?
A what?
Is that like kind of like if you're running the validation, is that kind of like running a master node in a sense, or not really?
I'm not that familiar with master.
Okay.
So
No, it's fine.
Full node, right? I think it's if you're validating, you're probably right.
you are like a full node, like a get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The Talix actually posted an equation showing the amount of validators you have determines how long the block's going to be set around 15 minutes. So it's kind of, you've got to pick between a very secure, very decentralized one with a lot of validators, but time you can mathematically pick out. If you have like 100,000, it takes 15 hours per block. So he said around 1,000, keep it at that 15-minute mark. It's all in his medium.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love reading the docs medium. So that's a great point. Okay, slashing conditions, or how we punish validators that misbehave. So there are 4 slashing conditions. and they are the prepare requirement, the commit requirement, the prepare commit consistency, and the no double prepare. I'm about to go over each of these individually, but if you're super interested in one more, speaking of the Taoist Medium blog, there is a minimal slashing conditions article that highly recommend. Great read. Go for it. So the prepare requirement basically says that the epic source of each prepare must itself have at least 2/3 prepared. So just use this visual example here. If an epic has 4/5 prepares, you can use it as an epic source. But if an epic has 1/3 prepares and you try to use it as an epic source, then you'll be slashed and lose everything. This is basically so that the epics you're relying on previously it basically means that they've already received a sufficient amount of validator support. Then there's the commit requirement. Basically, before anyone should commit, if they don't want to get slashed, they need to wait until a block receives at least 2/3 prepares. Another visual demo here. 4/5 prepares, committing, valid. 1/3 prepares. If you commit on that epic, it's invalid and you will get slashed. Then there's prepare commit consistency. This is the most, at least in my opinion, the most complex and confusing one. Basically, you must never submit a prepare in such a way that the prepare epic source is less than the commit epic, and the commit epic is less than the prepare epic. How I think about it is that you need to include your last commit in your next prepare. So you have to stick by what you said. The commit is you backing a block, and then your next prepare has to stick by that commit. And without this slashing condition, basically it's been proven that multiple chains could split off, and that's bad for the Ethereum network, so that's why this exists. And then lastly, the no double prepare. So you cannot prepare on multiple blocks in one epic. So before I compared preparing to signaling, you can't signal that you're supporting multiple blocks. So if you make one prepare, it's fine, you're good to go. But if you make that second prepare within the same epic, boom, everything you staked is gone. Yes.
How is this being enforced programmatically?
I have a section on that, so I'll get there. It's a great question, though. Okay, so I don't know what you guys think, but at first, when I first heard about slashing, I was like, wow, I'm going to be putting up a bunch of money, and some of the slashing conditions, at least for me, were a little confusing. And what if I even follow the slashing conditions, but there are enough other bad validators that they force me to basically violate a slashing condition? Can I lose like everything? And the answer to that is no. There's nothing to worry about. One of the primary goals in mind when designing these slashing conditions and designing the system is that no matter how many bad actors there are, they can never force an honest validator to break a slashing condition. So even if there are 1 million validators colluding against me, if I'm honest, I still won't violate a slashing condition. That being said, they could still block my transactions and everyone will lose, but I'll get to that in a second. So, providing availability. Basically, how we make sure blocks keep getting mined and encourage consensus to be reached efficiently. So, basically, if checkpoints do not finalize blocks, this is very bad for the network. There are no guarantees, and it pretty much stagnates. And how quickly blocks become finalized is also very relevant, just based on what you want to do. If blocks take a day to become finalized, sure, it might work if you're selling a house for $200,000. But if you're trying to open up the next gambling site online, or something probabilities, or something that requires lightning fast updates, you do not want to wait a day. It's just bad. So the goal is to encourage validators to confirm blocks and finalize blocks as quickly as possible. This is done first by rewarding validators based on the utility they provide to the Ethereum network. One, I would say, of the hardest parts that's still being developed is that the protocol, Casper in general, cannot differentiate between a validator being offline and censored. So the protocol only knows that it's not receiving transactions, and it can't tell why. So kind of getting back to what I said, you could be a good actor, and if you're censored, it still is not good for the network. And so this is an awesome graph kind of just explaining the possible outcomes for validators. I'll just go through it pretty quickly. So if you're a validator and you do nothing, if an epic gets less than 2/3 prepared, that's the worst because it can't move forward. If an epic gets less than 2/3 commits, that's also good. You're providing very little utility, you're doing nothing. And even if it gets greater than 2/3 commits and is finalized, it's still bad because you yourself as a validator provided no utility to the Ethereum network. Now, if you're only preparing and the block receives under 2/3 prepares, you did your best, but it's still not good, so you're going to get punished. It's better than nothing, not good. If the block gets less than 2/3 commits, this is significantly worse because you did prepare, but you could have committed and you didn't. So you could have contributed to a block being finalized, but you chose not to for whatever reason. And if you only prepare and a block does get finalized with greater than 2/3 commits, you still could have done more, but it's better. And if you only are committing, first, you don't want to do this if there's less than 2/3 prepares. It violates a slashing condition and you'll lose everything. If there are less than 2/3 commits and you commit, you're doing your best. It's not great. You could prepare as well. And then if it's greater than 2/3 commits, the block is finalized. You committed, which is the most important step, but it would have still been more utility for the Ethereum network if you prepared as well. And finally, preparing and committing. This is the best if you can do it. Obviously, as I mentioned before, you don't want to commit if there are under 2/3 prepares. Once again, if there are under 2/3 commits, even though you're doing everything you can, block still isn't being finalized. And finally, the optimal scenario, block being finalized and the validator both preparing and committing. So basically what's happening here, you see like the worst and not good and stuff. So if blocks aren't being finalized, everyone loses, even if you're doing your best. This encourages collaboration between validators to get blocks finalized as quickly as possible, and it encourages consensus as opposed to stagnation, because although basically the slashing rules don't protect against stagnation, the negative interest does. So, to summarize,
Check the HDMI cord. You might have stepped on it against the wall.
definitely could have happened. To summarize, users join and stake their ether, they become validators. If validators break slashing conditions, they lose everything. If validators prevent blocks from being finalized or don't contribute sufficiently, or if blocks aren't finalized for whatever reason, they end up losing money. And proof of work will slowly be phased out, and validators will make money by validating the one true chain, if you will. And I won't cover this in depth now. It's I could have like another probably 40 to an hour talk on just this. But basically, this is how it works in a very short manner. Each validator set is called a dynasty, and after 2 epics are successfully finalized, the validator set changes. If you're interested in learning more about this, Vitalik has another great Medium article on it that I would encourage all of you to read. And putting it together with fork choice. So before towards the beginning, I mentioned a scenario when miners colluded and they actually didn't accept validator transactions at all. And this basically right here explains why that won't work. So the new fork choice rules will first iterate over all the dynasties and find the most recent set of validators. Then it will go iterate through the epochs and basically go to the most recent epoch, sorting through possible epochs by which epoch has received the most commits. And then finally, after that, they will rely on proof of work. So proof of work is relied on in between checkpoints, but checkpoints have the final say. That's Casper, and if I have time, and you guys are interested in hearing, I can talk a little bit about the smart contract side of things, because there's actually a Casper smart contract that will basically take in the transactions and make sure everything's running how it should be. So I can answer questions, I can talk about that. Yeah.
So there's like a checkpoint where they do proof of work, and then I wasn't here for the beginning, sorry, but then you have like some proof of stake to get to another checkpoint, then you do proof of work again.
It's the other way.
Oh.
So when it's first implemented,
Oh, right now.
there will right now there's just proof of work.
I mean, like Casper,
The hybrid version of Casper will basically have validators validate a checkpoint every 100 blocks, and then the 99 will be done using proof of work. Yeah.
Just really quickly, you had a phrase that came by a sort of copy, was if they do enough, if there's enough validation, enough work, you said the word enough, sufficient amount, something like that. Is there always a hard and fast quantity to how each of the efforts move forward?
Could you speak up a little? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Basically, if one of the validation processes doesn't quite do enough, like you had talked about, what's the test? Where's the test in each echo to see if something moves forward or not?
If it's received 2/3 commits, it's enough.
So just 2/3.
Yeah, 2/3 commits, it can receive more, and that's a good thing, but 2/3 commits is kind of the line.
Can you maybe go over like metaphors or like a higher level, like the difference between a prepare and a commit? Because like in proof of work, you just node, you're peer-to-peer, you're getting all these transactions, you're building blocks. Then when you win the knots, you relay it, everyone else checks, and voila. Like now we have two things: preparing and committing. What?
Yeah, totally. So how I think about it is committing is quite, in my opinion, like it's the more risky of the two. And you don't want to get that wrong. And you have to commit on a block that has at least 2/3 prepared. So commit is saying this will be the next block and making that bet. And I guess I see prepares as more as a way for signaling and for kind of like to start reaching consensus without the harmful consequences that come with committing. Because it's easier to violate slashing conditions with a commit, and like committing should be the final say. That's how I think about it.
Okay. And all you can do is like censor. You can prepare blocks in such a way that it would censor a transaction, but you can't like create some transaction out of thin air that shouldn't happen. The only power is a minor, and this is the same for proof of work, is that you can censor. There's censorship abilities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the whole idea is like if you have a bunch of bad validators, like over 2/3, and they kind of signal to have this block be valid, but it turns out this block is like censoring the transaction. This would be like the 51% attack equivalent.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely not like invincible.
Yeah.
By any means.
Except it's the 66%.
Yeah, exactly. That's, yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah. I could talk to you more about it maybe later.
If you prepare, can you choose to not do the opposite, like unprepared? Like you just undo that prepare.
Once you prepare, it's out there. The Casper smart contract is what takes care of things. So once you prepare, it's locked in.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
maybe could you talk about the smart contracts?
Yeah,
You just mentioned
that's the next part. It's
Cool.
cool. Okay, keep going.
No.
Oh.
Hello,
Okay,
this
that
is
was
your
good.
4-minute call to go refill your beverages, refill your plates, throw away the empty plates, and then to come in and find a seat. 4 minutes.
I'm gonna go talk.
Mic check.
Sure. So, how does this all work when it's inside a smart contract? Because when you put stuff in smart contracts, it can add quite a bit of complexity, I would say. But it also makes it so that hopefully immutable, which is the point, and adds security, and everyone can see what's going on. So, the goods far outweigh the negatives, in my opinion. So basically, the smart contract is a way of facilitating the consensus being formed between validators. And so basically, I talked about the validators bit already. The validator's job is fork choice, and they're sending the transactions. They're kind of like building the blocks out of the transactions. And then the smart contracts deliver the economic incentive, will deliver the economic incentives to the validators, and it will keep track of historical data. So this basically means that if a validator violates the slashing conditions, another validator, or pretty much anyone, can basically tattle on them, if you will, to this smart contract. And then this smart contract will first verify that they did violate a slashing condition, and then it will slash their funds if it finds out they actually did. So, how does the Casper smart contract work? It is on the blockchain, and what's interesting about this is that the Casper smart contract can only see its own blockchain. So it can't see like other potential blockchains or potential blocks. It only sees what's in its lineage, which is why, if you imagine it, that's yourself as a smart contract, like this part doesn't exist for it. It only sees this part. And same with this, it only sees that part behind it, which is why if a slashing condition is violated somewhere else, the smart contract can't pick it up on its own. It needs someone to report it. But it does incentivize the reporting if someone submits, basically tattles on someone, and the smart contract finds out that someone has broken a slashing condition. I think currently the person who reported it, could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's at 4%. So you basically get 4% of all funds, and 96% of the funds are destroyed. This encourages people to tattle on each other if slashing conditions are broken.
So is that the main method of when you get slashed, that most of the tokens get destroyed permanently?
Yeah. Yes. In short, one of the goals of this is that if, say, finality was broken and at least one third of all validators' funds got slashed, there might be a disrupt due to the validators misbehaving, but there would also be a huge decrease in supply, which this hasn't happened in reality yet, so who knows what will actually happen. But the idea is that the decrease in total supply will actually drive the price up. Yeah, love that.
That has happened.
Yeah.
I mean, everywhere in the world, supply and demand.
Oh well, yeah. So it hasn't happened on the Ethereum network yet.
Yeah.
I know, but yeah, it's a pretty common economic principle. So this is just kind of still illustrating that basically, as I said before, that the smart contract can only, one reality for it is its own lineage. Boom. And so this is kind of representing how a validator would talk to the smart contract, because I kind of think of the smart contract as the brain of things. So the validators are in contact with the smart contract. They send the smart contract their prepares. They send the smart contract the commit, and the smart contract takes care of everything. One interesting thing that at least I was concerned about when I first learned about this was that because everything is happening on chain, let's go. Oh, let's go.
You're good.
Basically, it can be hard to tell if things are happening fast enough, just because what if an epoch has been finalized but it's not on chain yet, and then someone sends a commit or a prepare, and then they get slashed when really they were valid. It just didn't make it the transaction to take it the past epic over the 66% hadn't made it into the smart contract yet. And the solution for that is basically because, at least for hybrid Casper, because proof of work is still used, there's going to be a waiting period before when one checkpoint ends, and basically the prepares can start for the next checkpoint. Yes.
So if you have these smart contracts that are drawn out here living, like these are forks kind of, and they can only see their own chain, and that's one of the advantages of having them be a smart contract, is like they're bootstrapping the natural feature of the blockchain. How do you, this one of the slashing conditions, if you have a validator commit on two kind of blockchain states, how do you, if they can't see each other, the chains can't see each other, how's that handled?
Through tattling.
Okay.
In the sense that, so a chain can't see, or I would say the big issue is probably the main chain, and the one that's really moving forward can't see, but it can be proven that if someone prepared twice.
Okay, I'm confused on how that could, like, you could just have a bunch of people tattle, but how many do you need, or maybe that line?
One would be enough, because I honestly,
I think we can agree on that.
Yeah. Tattle!
Sharing.
So like you have the main chain and then you have a fork and then you're a validator and you're committing on both. Somebody tattles, but like the main chain can't see the fork.
I think it has to do with how you're digitally signing every prepare.
Oh, you could okay.
I think.
Yeah.
I'm
could
pretty
see
sure
that.
I could.
You could take the signature and put it on the main chain.
Yeah.
And make it say that that signature was indeed. Okay,
Yeah,
that totally makes sense.
Okay. Yes.
So I'm kind of newbie to some of this, but like, if you want to do a fork, a friendly fork or whatever, do you still have to like slash half a third of your funds or like?
At least I think for now, Ethereum's goal is to not have any forks, any unplanned forks in the future. Like, what do you mean by a friendly fork? Like,
Yeah, so I mean,
I
friendly. I mean, like say Bitcoin went to Bitcoin Cash, and they just took the existing state and like copied it, and like now that's it's kind of
for that to
there's a split maybe.
For that to happen with Casper's, slashing conditions would have to be met. That's
And I think there's a difference between forks where miners are disagreeing with each other, like on transaction state, and then forks where you're simply using different software. So like Bitcoin Cash is using different software, Ethereum Classic is using different client software. That I think you could just fork Ethereum, like the code base, edit it, and then create it.
Oh yeah, if you're doing that, then yeah, you totally could. If you, as soon as you like mess with the code base, then it won't be like the main public Ethereum. It'll be something else. But you could totally put it out there and see what happens. Cool.
When you guys implement this, will it be done on the next fork? And what if the proof of work miners in the current state say no, we don't want it? How is that the consensus rules changed?
So that kind of plays into the fork choice rules. The game plan is not to give them an option. Essentially, I mean, if they refused it and refused the update, they could, and that would create a fork. But yeah.
Is there any anticipation of that?
I guess I'm probably a bit sheltered in the sense that like a lot of the people I spend my time with are very pro Ethereum, pro Casper. I would wager there is a bit, but probably less so than with Bitcoin, just because Ethereum does have a history of cohesion, I would say.
What percentage of dissent would have to show up for that fork to happen? So what percentage of miners' consensus would have to happen for it to go?
I'm like,
One.
yeah, like I guess I'm confused. I don't know how. I think it's pretty subjective how much would have to happen for it to be considered valid. But anyone could fork it by not accepting it and just doing their own thing.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be like a mining, like who has more mining power at that point. You would just have like a proof of work fork and a proof of stake fork, and then the market would determine which one is valuated. Like just people's buying and selling would just signal which one is valued more.
I think that is. This is just like kind of demonstrating how repair would happen, but we covered it. Basically, yeah, that is my talk on Casper from the Ghost and yeah, smart contracts.
You heard the hackathon?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Sweet. Are any other questions? Are we good on that?
I got a real quick question. Say you're a node and get knocked offline for an extended period of time, and say there's two competing chains. How do you decide which one's the correct one?
So, are you saying you're a validator or just?
How do you choose the true chain?
I would say you would look at the most recent validator set and the most recent epoch with commits, because there won't be two, because for that to happen, slashing conditions will have had to be validated.
I'm just like worst case scenario, like see there could be two in the case of like an attacker, right? And how does the system decide which one is true if that case did happen? Does it take human input, or can it figure that out on its own?
At least as far as I know, I don't believe it can figure that out on its own. At least as far as I know, Ethereum tends to be fairly welcoming towards human involvement, just with the Ethereum Foundation and everything. So I would wager humans would get involved, but I'm not positive.
Sweet. So I guess that is it for the talk. We'll probably head over to the beer garden again, unless anybody has a better suggestion, and continue the conversation there. So I guess thanks everybody for coming, and that's a wrap. Thank you. Yeah.